to, okay, we're good. Would you like to, while we're waiting for Neil to get here, would you like to talk about the League of Women Voters of Colorado challenging the one-party elections law in the federal courts?
Sure.
Okay.
On Friday, LWVCO filed in federal court a suit against the state for HB 251319, which limited vacancy elections for county commissioners that now happen during that can happen during general elections. Uh, okay, I'm not explaining this well. Sorry. HB 25 1319 established a new way to do vacancy elections for county level vacancies. Before it was by appointment of the aligned political party. The legislature changed it so that there would be special elections. Depending on the timing, these special elections might occur within a general election. But these vacancy elections are limited to just unaffiliated voters and voters of the same party as the resigning county official, typically commissioners. We believe that it is, thank you, Celeste, unconstitutional. And there is a sister law for state level as well that we will be talking about next week. Celeste put the link to the press release in chat.
I sent a link out. I sent information out to everybody as a follow-up email. So if you guys will check your emails, you should have that information along with an article by Courageous Colorado, and so you can follow up and get more details. Beth, did you have anything else to add to that?
The league serves as a plaintiff along with two league members who live in El Paso County who were directly affected by the implementation of this law this past November. They were disallowed from voting for a vacant county commissioner a position that was, their county commissioner, but they weren't allowed to vote because of their party affiliation. So we will be in touch as that moves forward. Go ahead, Celeste.
So the press release is for the legislative vacancies. You talked mostly about the county commissioner vacancies, and but so have both of those lawsuits been filed or just one?
Just the one.
According to the press release, it says it's the HB, it's the legislative, not the county commissioner one.
Oh, I apologize. I misspoke.
Okay.
That is
Okay.
coming down the pike.
No worries. You have been very busy, Beth. Thanks for all you've been doing.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And this wouldn't have happened without Celeste's advocacy and expertise. So that cannot be understated.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you, Celeste.
Okay, well, Neil is here now. Sorry about the mix-up, Neil. Neil is here along with Lori Stevens and Michael Raish. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Michael?
That's just fine.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, just just so that we have as much time as possible to give to Neil and his colleagues. I'm rather than going through and having everybody introduce ourselves, you can see who's here. There will be Jane will be sending me a link because I seem to have a hard time making those work, but she'll send me a link after this has been recorded and uploaded to YouTube, which I can send out to everybody so that you can share with others, or you can go back and review. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Neil, and you have the rest of the meeting. And you are muted. There you go.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Karen, and I go with congratulations for Celeste for kicking the ball off on this violation of two constitutions and all the hard work that I know Beth and her team have done to make it happen. So that's great. We are here. So myself, I've been doing listening audits for decades and care a lot about them, and have recently been joined by two amazing colleagues. So we have Mike Raish, who several years ago reached out and was interested in not only kind of audits, but really improving the overall that decisions are made around how the audits happen, because all of us have seen, tremendous pressure on election officials and official skepticism and lots of things that have made auditing work a lot more complicated in recent decades, in recent years. And so I'm going to pitch in, and then Lori Stevens, who contacted me last fall and had already done a year's worth of work writing auditing software based on some of the amazing open source. There are now two big open source projects on the internet to do election auditing, risk limiting audits. So just so happy to have such great collaborators. And
Neil, can you stop for just a minute? Can all of you understand Neil? I'm having a hard time understanding him. Okay.
And
okay, we can't hear you now.
Part of the problem. Can you hear me better now?
Can you? We can hardly hear. Is that true of the rest of you? Nod your heads.
Yeah, you're very low volume, but it is more clear.
Yes.
But it's very low.
Get my volume level. I am out of pocket because I'm
Still very low.
better if I bring it way up there. Testing.
That's getting better.
Yeah.
What?
If you
It's
could
better, but still low.
Yeah, but you are clearer. It's easier to understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, I will hope that this will work. I guess I can bring this up just a little bit more if that's still clear and not too awful. And I will rely on my colleagues to jump in if I become either.
Is this better for everybody? Nod your heads.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Take it away.
Thank you. And please do interrupt when things don't come through. It's so worthless to not hear things. So I'll just quickly reiterate that I'm so glad that Michael Raish and Lori Stevens have dived in big time to not just being interested in promoting risk limiting audits, but helping make them better. The result of that work, there are two main things we want to talk about today. One of them is how to make the audit more transparent and observable for reasons that we'll point out are really important. And the other is how to increase the independence of the administration of the audits. And both of these are intended to get election officials out of the position of having to say, trust us. I trust them. They're doing amazing work. I can't imagine trying to jump into that work myself because the deadlines and the support and the bureaucracy and the requirements are very challenging. We have asked for a lot in making elections open and easy to vote and secure and so on. And that has become ever more difficult. But having more independence in how they are administered, and in particular how the audits are administered, would go a long way to not having to trust your local election official. And let's remember, there are lots of people in the country that don't trust, certainly a lot of election officials. They usually tend to trust their local ones more. But anyway, I'll go back to the first point, which we sent out a document that hopefully you all have seen. And if Lori or Mike can post a link to some of the things I'll talk about, that would be helpful. So the first one is just the question of how to know that the audit data both matches the official results and that the comparisons between what the humans, we have humans looking at pieces of paper, the voter verified pieces of paper. That's a critical piece of auditing. But then those humans enter that data into a computer, and yet a different computer miles away at the Secretary of State's office actually compares what the humans entered to what the original voting system determined. Now, the whole point of doing an audit is that as a computer scientist, I don't trust computers, especially computers that are controlled by, that are vulnerable, as they all are, despite our best efforts, and that are controlled by people who, just on principle, I don't want to have to trust. And it's a huge problem when the audit itself relies on different computers to do that. In theory, and we've seen examples and demos of all these things, hackers could compromise either the audit or the original election or both. And so we don't want to have to trust computers. And we have come up with a system that allows you, because you can go to your local election office during the audit, to take the official detailed results of how the election came out, which in Colorado, thankfully, almost uniquely in Colorado, we have a cast vote record of every sheet of paper in every ballot that was cast statewide in the election. The voter verified paper ballot are scanned, and we have the results of interpreting those scans, and it's called a cast vote record. It's hundreds of thousands or millions of lines indicating how the votes came out. And if you have access to that cast vote record, and if you know which ballots were pulled for the audit, it's actually a very simple matter of programming to tell you what you should hear when the humans go one by one through those ballots. And we have produced essentially a transcript. If there are no discrepancies, you will hear the first human pick up a ballot, and the first ballot will be this ballot, 12143, and the vote for mayor will be read out as, George Washington, and then the next office will be the treasurer, and they'll call out John Adams. You can literally just listen and have them and confirm for yourself that what you're hearing matches what is on a printed piece of paper in front of you as predicted by the cast vote record and the software we've written. So am I making sense so far? Can people actually still hear me? Is this connecting?
Yes.
So
And
Lori will be able to give us a quick demo of some of this. Lori and I did this pretty much in Broomfield County. We didn't actually have access at the time in the last election. We didn't have access to the cast vote record at that time, but we sat behind an audit board very quietly. We never said a word. You don't ever want to interrupt election workers while they're working. But we listened to them and made quick notes and audio recordings. And then a few weeks later, when we got access to the cast vote record, indeed, what we had expected and what we had recorded matched the actual records. And so this is actually one of the first times that a risk limiting audit in Colorado has been verified by real human beings to have matches between the pieces of paper and the interpretations of the auditors. And I'll just, in terms of background, note that the hardest part in this is twofold. First of all, actually having public access to those cast vote records before the audit. And second of all, the fact that these records have to be redacted. There are rare circumstances in which in Weld County, last I checked, there were only four voters in one of the congressional districts, which is mostly outside of Weld County. And if you publish, how many of them actually voted in the election, if you publish a cast vote record that has on the record that they voted in that unusual congressional district, you can narrow down who that ballot was cast by. So we have to do some redaction in rare cases where there are what we call rare styles, essentially sets of contests that if you look at a cast vote record, you know that nobody else had that particular combination of contests. So we have to do that. And normally election officials don't have to do that until after the election, in the redaction itself. So what we're asking and what we're trying to help election officials do is redact those cast vote records before the audit and make that data available to the public in a way that allows us, as we've said and as we will demonstrate, to let the public check that everything matches. I see Celeste's hand up.
So when you're talking about redaction here, you're talking about redacting the entire ballot versus not, like sometimes they redact information on a ballot because it might tell you who the identity of the voter is. But you're talking about not including those at all in the, okay.
This is a great question, and as you probably know, as someone who is so deeply entwined in elections, it's always a little more complicated than you think at first. The specific, first of all, I'll note the one that it's not, and that has changed recently. There was a cleanup bill in Colorado this year, which said that election officials no longer are required to identify any quote unquote stray marks on a ballot. There are people that draw little comics or images or write initials for all kinds of reasons. People make extraneous marks on their ballots. And until now, those were considered potentially identifying marks, even though they're not, because anybody can write anything they want. It doesn't have to be their initials or their name or whatever. And they had to redact that if they wanted to release the image of the ballot. That is no longer required. And so that's not what we're talking about, but it is another form of redaction applied to election records. What we're talking about is a fluid process, but one that is required by state law, that you can't report any results that are for less than 10 ballots of the same style, or that the actual law is a little more appropriately a little more general than that. But the way that we are doing the redaction in our software is to combine several of these ballots. When there's less than 10 of a given rare style, we combine them with other ballots so that the aggregate is more than 10. And then we report the aggregated total, so all the contest totals add up, but we are redacting rows. It is also possible to redact contests and to say, well, the real problem here is the dog catcher race, and if we just leave that out of everything we share, then that's no longer making any ballot styles rare. That's another way to do it. It's a little more complicated. We're not doing that. And I don't know, Celeste, did you want to follow up?
No.
Or?
So county clerks probably have opinions about this. And if you had required them to do all of the redaction of the stray marks and everything like that beforehand, I'm sure they would balk. But do you have a sense of how they feel about just redacting the rare ballot styles?
We're working on that. We have one clerk in La Plata County, Tiffany Lee, who helped us with this last time around and is fully on board doing it this time around. That is the hardest thing to do. There are other counties. Boulder wants to talk to us after the primary because they're already too busy. I've heard that Weld County, the wonderful Carly Koppas, is already testing our software, and so I hope that they like it or they have feedback that makes it easy for us to fix that. So we think it's a very simple process. We think they should be able to take the software, vet it themselves, run it on their own computers, takes just a few minutes or seconds, and then share the results. But we know that anything that is a change like this in elections is something that they're going to review very carefully and want a lot of help with. I don't know if Lori or Mike wants to chime in or.
The one thing, Neil, is when I do the demo here and I show a cast vote record, I can show what redaction means a little bit in an actual cast vote record file.
Great. Karen, your hand is up.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Number one, would the redactions just be done on the ballots that are chosen for the audit? So we're not looking at redacting thousands of ballots. We're just looking at redacting the ones that have been chosen for the risk limiting audit. And secondarily, if this is a new software program, what's the cost of this? That's going to add to the cost for the counties.
Those are great questions. In terms of cost, this is open source software. Nobody's charging anything for it. We're providing free services in the way that some others have provided, the other free software. And in terms of redaction, the whole point is that we also have to verify that the random selection was done right. So we need the full, yes, could be several 100,000 line cast vote record. That's actually a small file these days in computer terms. But we have to see the whole thing and what all the possibilities were. And then we will actually also run the same random selection algorithm based on the dice roll, and we will make sure that the correct ballots were selected. But we need to be able to see how all of the ballots were reported. We need to be able to independently total up all the columns, all the contests, and make sure that the reported results match the files that we're getting. And there will be a very rare situation where a rare style will intersect with a selected ballot. And I don't want to go into that, but it's so rare that we'll just ignore it if we want to. So
the number of redacted ballots is frequently very small, well less than 1%. In fact, in the El Paso County general election in 2024, they had like 300,000 ballots. They had to redact 32. That's all. So they're not. It's not very much.
Well, let me have one quick follow-up question before you go to Celeste. So you had talked about having an independent group that would come in and do this, that it wouldn't be done by the people that ran the election. It would be done by an outside group. are these people willing to donate their time? And do you have enough people that would be available on election day or the days after when this is done to visit every county clerk's office?
Well, I'd certainly like to, and it's another great question, and this is actually why we're talking to you all, because we hope that, goodness, my throat is.
So if I could make a comment about that specifically, what we're really talking about is the critical decisions that are currently made by the Secretary of State should be made by an independent person. So it's not that the whole audit process or the whole Canvas board process has to change. The people who are doing it right now would likely be the same people who would be doing it in the future. It's just those key decisions about what races are going to be audited, what's the risk limit to be determined. All those kinds of things really determine a lot about the race. And we would like to see those made by an independent committee rather than the people who are running the elections also controlling the audits. So,
Okay, just to clarify, Michael, then what you're saying is that the process will be pretty much the same as what it is now, but rather than whoever's in the Secretary of State's office making that decision, that this independent committee, and would it be different for each county? In other words, would the races that they chose be different in La Plata than they would be, say, up in Wells or some other county?
well, a lot of
Can
those
I just
decisions
jump
are.
in? Can I just jump in and say that this is the second topic that we're going to come to after we talk about
Okay.
observing
Yeah.
the audit? And we've shared with you two documents. The first one that Karen shared was the proposal for working with the clerks and with you all to observe the audits better. The second proposal is a proposal that would make this process of designing the audit, change it from the Secretary of State to an independent body of some sort. So let's hold off on the independent body piece, and let me come back to first answering your question and then to Celeste. So as I heard your question, Karen, it was, who is going to show up and sit behind an audit board and listen to what they say and check it against what the cast vote record says, which is what we're asking you all to do. I'm hoping you all won't charge for your services. I'm hoping that there are volunteers around the state to do that. We're going to have to ramp it up. It's going to take time as we learn what this is really like. We have a bit of a sense that it'll work because Lori and I did it, but this is where we really think groups, not just like the League, but like other organizations, political parties, and so on. We would like to make it easy for any individual to really lend a great deal of independent verification of the audit to be paired later on with independent design of the audit. Celeste?
Thanks. Yes, I had two quick questions. I think they're quick. One is, it says in the section confirming that ballots audited for the RLA match the CVR. It says, number 2, take a seat behind an audit board where it's possible to hear both the election judges read votes from a ballot. Are you able to see also or only hear?
There are a lot of things that are going on. So what our eyes, and this is our example, and we're open to everybody making this better. In our example, our eyes were looking at our script of what we expected to happen. And it might make sense for Lori to just do this demo. Is this something that you would do a demo of, Lori? You're muted. You're muted, Lori.
I'm mainly demonstrating the use of the tool, but in context, I can talk about how you would actually use it. So it may be just go ahead and start. We might want to just go ahead and demo and then see what questions remain after that.
Can you share the script itself, the output of the script?
I will be. That's part of the demo. It will show up.
Okay.
So I'll show one of those, what they look like.
You are now a co-host, Lori, so you can upload stuff.
Celeste, did you still have a question though?
My other question, I don't think is going to be addressed by the script, but above where I was reading before on page 2, it says select additional physical ballots to be compared to their CVR entry. So the public audit verifiers would be selecting additional ballots in addition to the ones that show up on the manifest from the Secretary of State's office or whatever organization chooses those. So I know, like in Boulder County, they didn't bring out all the ballots. They only brought out the ballot boxes for the ballots that needed to be pulled. So there were still some back in the back room. So, I don't know.
No, it's a great question. And we would be, in counties where that's the case, I think the easiest approach would be to say the canvas board or whoever is allowed to make those additional selections needs to do it at the same time the Secretary of State rolls their dice. And the election officials will then know that, there's 10 more ballots. We're not talking about a lot or whatever. Maybe there's 10 more ballots, and please pull the boxes for those 2 so that we can get them at the same time. So logistically, that's an important thing to pay attention to for sure.
Thanks.
And would there be some kind of a system, Neil, like with the rolling of dice? Is there some kind of a system that the local group would use so that it's
So the example that I give for these enhanced audits, I mean, first of all, there are some people who just roll their eyes when they hear somebody say, we rolled a 20-digit number and we did a SHA-256 hash of it, and we ran this algorithm, and that said what you're going to look at. And they either don't believe it or they think it's too complicated. So there are people who I think could be reached much more effectively if we basically said, ideally, if all the ballot boxes were at hand, I'm gonna roll my own dice, and the die number is going to tell me exactly which ballot. I have my own process, and I understand it, and therefore I trust it more. That's one option. Another option would be to say there were public reports that this particular ballot box, was suspicious, or there was dust in some of the ballots, and that affected the scanners, and there was all this extra redaction in the scanning. I mean, there might be reports that people are interested in a particular precinct, a particular contest, a particular box of ballots. And if there are reports like that, then it would be wonderful for someone to be able to say, well, I want to look in more detail at that. And that's exactly what I did in 2008 when Hillary Hall let me do a really fancy, nearly risk-limiting audit of the ballots. And there was public press reports that said some of the toner got in the creases of folded ballots, and that meant that there were some marks that were interpreted as votes. And I said, well, let me look at some of those. Tell me where, let's look where that happened. And I'm going to do some extra sampling there. And she said yes. And her staff was like, wow, really? Seriously? Okay, we'll do it. And it all worked fine. And it gave, it addressed the public concern. So these targeted selections are intended to deal with whatever it is that gives people extra skepticism, so that you can say, well, come and look. We'll just show you how it works. Lori, do you want to?
Okay, yeah, I'm ready. Let me get my screen shared here. Okay, did that work? Can people see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the way that this gets started is a little up in the air, like how we actually provide this tool, how we provide the data that they need. In general, we want county clerks, the tool is going to be provided by some other thing. We're going to get this some public way to get this tool on your computer, but the actual data will be supplied by the county clerk. And we that is where we are asking them to provide a directory full of data that we can roll up into a single file, and that part of the process of someone going through this is they will download that data. So right here in this file, this is my program, this is my data, and you'll see how I use it when we go through it. But first, I want to do a quick
Did you
look.
see this dialogue that popped up? Which device did you plug in? Do you want to make that go? Beautiful.
Is it gone? Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. So let's do a quick look at a cast vote record, see what it actually looks like. So I have taken a real cast vote record from an election and I cut it way, way down to make it of a manageable size. So you can see that across the top, we have all of the contests that were on the ballot. And these would be all the contests for all the ballot styles for the entire county. I just chose a few of them here. And then the choices, you can see here are the choices for these particular races. And then every line, every row in this, it's basically a giant, a cast vote record is basically a giant spreadsheet. And every line after every row after these header rows is a ballot. So the whole row records how a ballot was voted. And so you can see for these two, in this ballot, a 1 means that the vote contained a vote for this choice. A 0 means that there was no vote for that choice. So you can see how all these votes were cast for these 2 mayoral candidates. And then we get down here, you can see that like in this local ward, not every ballot has the has that race on it. If a cell is just blank, it means that contest did not appear on that ballot. And so you can see how there are different ballot styles. Some ballots have this county clerk, county council member election. Some have a different one. In this case, they all have a bunch of propositions. Voter, proposition LL, whatever. And then here you have identification information for each ballot. Every ballot is uniquely identified by the tabulator that was used to scan it, its batch ID and a record ID. And then, so if in the case of redaction, this information stays in the file. Precinct information may be removed depending on the options that we used when we ran the redaction. And then if a ballot was redacted, every single cell on that ballot's line would have an X in it to erase whatever the ballot. So you can no longer see what contests were on that ballot because they're all X's across the board, how they were voted or anything. And then at the very bottom of the cast vote record, for all those X'd out ballots, you'll see the sum of all of those, such that when you run the totals for the entire cast vote record, you'll still get all the same election results as to who, how many votes every candidate got. This is a small sample file. Typically, the width of these files could be 100 to 200 columns because it's every race, every option. And then the length, of course, is every ballot. So you could have 100,000, several 100,000 rows in a cast vote record. And what that means is that it's very unwieldy. In order to enable people to compare ballots to the cast vote record, you just can't do it with this giant spreadsheet. So that's why we have a tool for that. And so I am going to cancel this spreadsheet and we're going to bring up the tool.
And by the way, even the tool that Lori's bringing up is something that you might not have to run. One of us can actually run it and we'll give you the output of the tool, if you trust us, or you can do it all yourself from first principles and open source. We will give you essentially the script of what you should hear when sitting behind a particular audit board.
So you might, if you were in, let's say that a couple of LWV members were going to observe the Broomfield County election, whatever, they might coordinate in advance to say, so are you going to run the tool or am I going to run the tool? Are you going to print out the ballots or am I going to print? They could coordinate between each other how they're going to do this. This is what you would want to do, or you can just do it for yourself. If you, there's a lot of flexibility for how people can work together in this process. And I should also point out that the reason that I got involved with this whole thing in the first place is that we initially envisioned this to be principally of use to Canvas board members, so that they could do an additional comparison of their own comparison of what was being read off the ballots to how those ballots were recorded in the digital record of the scan, which is the cast vote record. So we would like Canvas board members to also do this process. So we're going to start by supplying the file that would have been downloaded from the state, or I'm sorry, the county. We're going to open that up, and when we provide that, and now there's a couple options, but we're really just going to look at the first one, which is where you are preparing to do this ballot comparison during a rest limiting audit. And what you want to do here is you want to print lists of some of these ballot contents. And one of the things that would have come in that input file is the list of all the ballots that were selected to be audited for that county. So that list is typically 100 to 200, ballots. And that's what you're actually going to be using, not the original cast vote record. But we're going to extract that data from the real cast vote record. So here in this case, I'm going to provide a file to put our output into. And then now, so we can look to see, we're going to print the audit board list. And what this is going to print is for each of the audit boards, and every county has at least one audit board, and typically more, depending on how many ballots that they are going to have to audit. They have multiple boards. And let's say we're going to print all the audit boards, the lists. And so that print, that you can see that succeeded. And if we go to this directory, we go to look at output files, and here is an example of one. And so you can see for every ballot, you can see all the ballots are here, and it shows the imprinted ID. That's the identification of the ballot. And when you're at an RLA and you're listening to a audit board member do their process, the first thing they do is they read off this imprinted ID. And so you as the observer can make sure that, yes, that is ballot 102-1-7. So you can, they are between that you got two audit board members that are working side by side, two audit judges, one Republican, one Democrat, and then there's a county election staff member who's entering this data into the computer, which connects to this app called Corla, which is the state Colorado RLA program. And so they are communicating between themselves.
So Lori,
yes.
I watched one of these things happen, and I just want to make sure everybody understands what's happening. So the only person who's actually looking at the cast vote record are you and Neil.
That's correct.
The people who are the Democrat and the Republican, who they're looking at the paper ballot.
Yes.
And they're telling the staff person what to enter.
Correct.
And the staff person only sees blanks, and they fill in the blanks.
They fill in the blanks.
Right. Okay, good.
So none of them have
I'm
access
really glad
to
you
the
said
cast
that,
vote
Celeste,
record.
because that's really the principal issue. When Mike first showed up in an audit, at the end, he saw all these people just entering in data from ballots, and then there was a long pause, and then somebody from the county said, well, we heard from the state that everything checked out. We didn't know until this moment whether it was all going to check out, but it all checked out and we're all done, and there was a big applause. And he's like, who did the comparison? Why would I trust the comparison? What do you mean? There's a black box somewhere. We thought we were trying to get rid of black boxes. So keep going, Lori.
So yes, so that's the only person who has the cast vote record are these observers. And that's intentional, because we don't want the people who are actually doing the audit. We just want them to read what they see off the physical ballots, and then they're recording that as we go. So you can see how each race was, and then as they read these off, mayor, Groom, Ward 4, Hardwin, and then you as the observer have your piece of paper here, and you're just like checking them off. Yep, correct, 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 correct. Or even just looking at it, whatever. You're just looking for any differences. And the vast majority of these, unless there's something really wrong, they almost all match. So, but that's what we're verifying, right? That's the whole purpose of this, is to make sure we really are matching. So we have this file, and that's how the majority of the work will be done by these observers. Then if we go back out to the program here, we talked about how you could select additional ballots yourself.
Right. Can we just go back for 1 second to
sure.
the list that you just showed?
Yeah.
Because I want to make it very clear. We're explaining the whole process. We're explaining the issues in the process. We're explaining all this stuff that might make people's head spins. All we're asking volunteers to do is to take a printout like this, which we're willing to produce for you if we can get the cast vote record. Take this printout, go to a county, say, can I show up at the RLA? Some counties will say, sure, no problem. Other counties will say, well, you need watcher credentials or something. We'll work through that. County by county, we'll figure that out. But go to a county, have a printout like this, and just ask to sit behind, the right audit board quietly. Never say anything, never challenge anything. If it's not making sense, quietly talk to a minder who's supposed to work with you. Never interrupt the audit board, but just listen. And you should hear them read almost word for word what you see in front of you right now. Imprinted ID 10217, city and county of, Mayor Kimberly Groom, Ward 4 Larry Hardin. And one person will read that through, having looked at it, and they'll enter the data. Then they will reverse roles. The other person will look at the physical ballot. They'll read it again. They'll check that it's all there. So you get to hear it twice if you thought there was anything weird, and then just move on. And if you ever hear a discrepancy, the only thing we're asking is that you make a note. Well, what did you hear? Rarely, it didn't happen for us in Broomfield, rarely you will hear, oh my goodness, I heard them say it was a no vote. I'm looking at this, my script says it should have been a yes vote. Just circle that, just write down yes. And then later on, go and say, gosh, this is weird, but I heard this and you heard that, and I just wanted to work it out at a time when it won't interrupt things. I just want to make it clear that's all we're asking. We can do all the rest of the support in terms of producing this printout, in terms of helping you understand or meet with clerks if you can find them and so on. But just to be clear about the human observer part, which is where we can't be at 64 places across the state at the same time.
Celeste?
So, Neil, I don't know if you remember the time there was a risk limiting audit in Boulder County, and they actually pulled the wrong ballot. I guess the ID got printed on 2 separate ballots, and then they updated one of the ballots. Anyway, they pulled the wrong ballot, and so they might not even have had the correct questions on there. Like they might have had Ward 2 instead of Ward 4. So in that case, you wouldn't mark the person that Austin Ward instead of Larry Hardwin. You would have written Ward 2 and then written the answer, but just keep track of it, right?
You're exactly right. The most common problem, and the Secretary of State documents this on the Public Audit Center after every audit, the most common problem when we hear a discrepancy, and we just call them all discrepancies because two different things, is that they're looking at the wrong piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And we have a whole bunch of procedures to deal with that. If that happens, we're willing to work through it or coach you through it or get your questions. But in a case like that, you might have a lot of things that were different. And if that happens, trust me, the issue is going to be that. You don't have to be absolutely accurate about everything. You're going to go to the end. You're going to hear them say, wow, we had some discrepancies, and you're going to say, yeah, I noticed them too. And they will pick additional ballots. The whole principle of the way this is designed is you don't allow them to, quote unquote, fix their problems. If there's a problem, the only thing that you do in a risk limiting audit is ask for more ballots, and it just takes a couple more ballots to resolve a discrepancy like that. But that's a great point. Thank you.
Well,
Karen?
we did go and find the problem though. I mean,
Yeah,
and
no, we'll track it down because we
Okay,
want
good.
them to not do it wrong the next time.
okay,
But they still, if it made the contest that they were auditing look dubious, then they would look for more ballots. Karen?
So
The if that this typically this actually happened in Broomfield, and if you remember that they we were watching it, they started to read off the ballot, and the judge read off the ID information, the imprint information, and the county said, no, wait, that's not the ballot. I know you said the next ballot you should be whatever, and they said, oh, we got the wrong ballot, right? And they went over and they pulled the correct ballot. Now, if they didn't catch that, and actually the observer is finding one discrepancy after another, right? This is what we think when you're all said and done, you haven't talked to these judges at all. But at the very end, if you do have a discrepancy, you say, can we look at this one ballot again? Because I saw a mismatch. And if they look closely and they say, oh, wait a minute, this was the wrong ballot, right? They can go pull the right ballot. And well, they're all done. I mean, they've already entered in the state. They can't change anything, right. But at least they can convince you as the observer that, no, you weren't crazy. We were, and this is the real ballot, and this is how it was voted, and this does match what you're seeing. And so you've resolved that discrepancy yourself.
Yeah, that would be hugely valuable. Karen?
So the voice that you're hearing, is that from the Secretary of State's office that's reading these things off?
No, it's a county. Well, there's no voice. I mean, so the voice is there's two the judges who are side by side. They are reading off what the votes on the ballot. There is a county election employee who is sitting at the computer working with Corla. And so we are listening to the audit board read off all of the votes. And then after they're all done, the county employee will read it all back. He says, okay, here's what I heard you say. I'm going to read off all these votes again. And then the audit board does a check to make sure that, yes, he did record them the way that they see the ballot. Those are the voices we're talking about.
Well, the information comes from the Secretary of State's office. There are people on site, a Republican and a Democrat.
Well, it comes from the ballot, the physical ballot. They went and they pulled the actual ballots. That's what the information is. And then the program that the county employee is using, the computer program called Corla, that is maintained by the state.
Okay, so they pull the ballots.
Mhm.
The
Audit board.
Politically balanced, Neil, the politically balanced people are reading the things off of the actual ballot, the ones that the Secretary of State's office have chosen, and perhaps this independent committee as well have chosen separate ballots. So they're reading the information off. The election employee, the county clerk election employee is putting those into the system and then is reading back that they match or they don't match.
Yes.
No.
Well, no, not that they match, only that.
Process. No one in the current process knows if there's a match or not. No person for 7, 8, 9, 10 years in Colorado, except when I was observing ones that I was on the inside for. No one knows whether they match or not. The computer reports the result of the match. That's the fundamental issue we're trying to do.
What the check that's doing is that when the county employee reads it back, at the same time, the two election judges are flipping through the ballots and making sure that they agree. well, I guess they just do it one at a time. And they would say, no, 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 that's not what we said was mayor. This vote says, such and such. And then the county employee really will change it because they're not done yet. They will correct the fact they may have misheard, right? So they're just making sure there's no simple mishearing errors. That they're not comparing it to the real CVR value. They're simply making sure that they heard the election judges correctly and recorded it correctly.
Okay, but then this group of people that you're asking to the eyewitnesses are looking at what they have in their
Right,
hands
right,
and
right.
make a notation if it doesn't match, so that at the
Right.
end, okay.
Right. Good question. Thank you.
So anyway, then we go back to the program again. So one thing we said that you could actually ask to have some separate ballot. You can make your own choice of some ballots that you want to see polled. However you do it, whether you're rolling your own dice or just picking numbers out of your head, you could actually do this in advance if you want. If you have produce a list of this. I need to. Honestly, I can't get to the. No, darn. I'm having screen sharing problems here because now I can't. Did you all lose it? You're
Still
We
there.
still see your print lists of ballot content.
okay. You can still see it. Okay. Okay. Now I just had there was Zoom stuff on the screen that where I couldn't hit this one button. So we're going to find we went to this input. So here's a ballot list. I'll show you. Well, it's just a list of imprinted IDs. And so then did we not open? Okay, there we go. Now we run the program and you will, however many ballots you selected. And now if you go here, back to we're going to go to the output files. Here's the ballot list that the 13 ballot, in this case, there was 13 ballots. Here's how those ballots were voted. So you can have your election judges for the audit board you're working with. They will work with the county staff. They will go get those ballots. And then the other thing that you get is the list of the ballots again with their imprinted IDs and what box they're in. So you can actually also tell, so here's the ballots that I want to look at, and here's the boxes that they're in. So you can give that to them. They bring those ballots back, they read them off, and you then compare them to your program. And because these are ones that you just chose on your own, they were not controlled by the state. And then one more option, if you want to do this actually at the if you want to just ask the RLA, you say, I just want one from that box right there. You can then look at a specific ballot and you can, you get they'll give the election judge a ballot. You will supply the tabulator number and the batch number and the ballot number, and then look up that ballot, and then the program will bring up the way that ballot was recorded by the scanner so that you can verify that when they're looking at the physical ballot, reading it how it was voted, that it agrees with how it was scanned. And
at this point, I just wanted to jump in and say, we've tried to make this easy for you in the sense of giving you a list of what would be said, making it easy to look up a ballot. You could if you don't trust software, if you just want to do it with the raw data, nothing that we're providing is any different than saying, go to that cast vote record that Lori showed in the beginning that has, 100 or 200 columns across and 250,000 ballots, and searching Excel or your own program will let you search for it and find the same data. It's just a little tricky and tedious and slow. So all we're trying to do is give you faster ways to understand what would be on a ballot somewhere. And there are all ways that this is all data that you would have access to. You could check it any way you want. We don't want you to have to trust our software, because we're back in the game of having to trust software. We're just trying to take public data and format it in a way that is easier to process. But it's still stuff that you can just take the raw data from them and check anything you want against the raw data.
And this program is something that you could build it on your own. Now, typically people don't know how to do this, or they're, unless they're expert in this area, but you can imagine the local Republican Party says, we're going to build our own version of this.
Oh.
You know, we're going to make sure that it really is the correct version, that the source was already read and things like that. Democratic Party might want to do the same. So they aren't trusting somebody else's version of this product because they built it themselves. So that's another way of being able to trust the software because your organization actually built it.
Well, but you're actually adding an additional set of ballots. We potentially are offering an additional set of ballots, not just the ones that the Secretary of State says you need to check. But
that's another way of evading, of getting outside the process of doing your own selection, independent selection.
And expanding it, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So I want to see if there's any questions about this. And I also want to get to the proposal for how to do a more independent oversight and design of the audit. But what questions can we answer? How can we make this actually happen in the primary this year? Who would be interested in stepping forward?
I've already indicated I'm happy to go to Durango.
You're awesome. Thank you, Karen.
Now, has anybody contacted Montezuma County to see if they're willing to participate in this?
No, that would be wonderful.
Is that something you want to do, or is that something you would like for me to do? I can give you her contact information.
Yeah, I mean, for all of these questions, we're certainly willing to help. If you have the right contacts, that's the most valuable thing. You know, it's always, clerks always like it when it's their own people saying, I have questions, than when somebody from somewhere else tries to jump in. So anyone who can help connect with their county clerk or help us do that would be great. Any others?
To volunteer for that?
Any other questions? Like how can we make this happen? Are you dubious? Would this help?
Jerry, you've been involved with elections for a long time. What are your thoughts? And you are on mute.
I'm mulling it over.
Okay.
It's a lot, I know.
I have a couple of things going. First of all, I have fading eyesight. I have old eyes. So being able to see is a concern. I'm also with my hearing aids. What can I hear? You know, that kind of thing. So it's a physical restriction that on my part that I have questions whether I would be able to do it well.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, in terms of the primary election in particular, the election is at the end of June. The audit, the rolling of the dice for the audit is July 13, if I have it right. That's a Monday. The actual audit depends on the county, but most counties tend to do it the next morning. Some counties will do it later on the same day, on Monday afternoon. Most Tuesday morning. Some counties will only get 50 ballots. Some might be, you know, depending on which contest they choose, have more. It's not important that you do absolutely everyone. You know, like any observation of any, you know, ballot read out or that you look at, that you compare with an actual previously obtained cast vote record is, in my mind, a huge, you know, stake in the ground of this is evidence that the outcome was right, that does not depend on computers. Literally, it does not depend on computers because you can verify every step of the way. Other questions or thoughts? So, you're most likely volunteering for July 14th, but it might be another date depending on your county.
So I'm happy to volunteer for the primary. I might not be allowed to volunteer for the general. And for instance, Adams County clerk invited me to see their processes. So, I don't need to do Boulder probably because Neil, you're in Boulder.
Well, Bowler is asking to work with us after the primary, so I don't think we're going to have. And let me just be clear that the hardest thing that we're asking counties to do is to either run our redaction program or redact their cast vote record themselves before the audit so that we have access to it and can run all this. Even if that's not the case, I'd love it for people to just go and listen and make notes or do an audio recording if they allow that and check it later, because that is more cumbersome but also effective. So I'd love to know if Adams County would be willing to work with us, for example. But Boulder, you would be listening and writing things down, but you wouldn't have anything to compare against until later, which makes it much harder. You'd need a recording really to do that reliably.
I mean, I thought the whole point was to test out this process.
That's why I'm saying this process, exactly as we laid it out, is not, Boulder is not willing to do that.
Right. So do you have
the general, maybe, especially if it works well elsewhere.
So what are the counties that are willing to do it that you know of?
So far
La
we
Plata?
have probably Weld County, La Plata County. We're still kind of working with El Paso County. We haven't really even talked to most counties. So people who are willing to volunteer could be invaluable in any of those or other counties.
I'm willing to travel.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thing that you could do if the county does not supply the cast vote record is what Neil and I did back in November, which is I had a little table sheet, like a piece of graph paper, and I was recording the values for just a couple of I couldn't do all the contests. It's too hard. You just can't do it. You can't keep up. But I would write down the imprint ID, and then I would mark how on my little table how each one of those ballots were voted. And then when a real cast vote record was made available after the election, I went back and I checked to make sure that they all matched, and they did. So it's not as good because it's after the fact. In particular for Canvas board members, it's after certification. They would like to do it before. People like me would like to do it before certification, but it's yet another way that you can do that comparison, and it moves us closer to. It's not the full process, but it's part of it, and we're trying to make this process more broadly used.
So, Mike, do you want to dive into the independence piece or
Sure.
any other comments people want to
Sure. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah.
As Neil pointed out at the beginning, over the last several years, we've seen an increase of skepticism about elections and how the audits are being conducted. And I agree. I've met a few people, not nearly as many as Neil, county clerks and folks that are working on elections, and I have a lot of trust in them too. But they're human beings, and when people criticize or question the work, they do what most human beings do. They try to defend themselves, and so what we think is a much better solution to convincing people that everything is being done right is, instead of relying on people within the I'll call it the election community to defend the work that they're doing, is it should come from outside of the election community. So, and this is not unique. I mean, when audits were developed for accounting and other purposes, they developed audit standards. Those audit standards, one of the basic principles of auditing standards is that the auditor should be independent from the people who are being audited. So it makes common sense. Why the elections evolved this way, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not really too concerned about it. So anyway, the generally accepted accounting standards, generally, or auditing standards, sorry, generally accepted governmental audit standards, they all call for independence as a primary principle. Um, the EAC has been studying, and they're thinking about issuing some standards, which Neil and Lori and I commented with them, gave them some ideas. And so, as part of that process, we wrote up a document, which I've put in the chat. Hopefully, everybody can download it, read it. I think that makes a better presentation than I can do verbally over the phone here today. But so we presented that also not only to the EAC, but we're trying to get some traction in the Colorado legislature and the Secretary of State's office. As you can imagine, government folks, once they have power, they're reluctant to give it up. So it's a slow process. But what would help a lot in that process is we see this as being not a partisan issue at all. This is all about just trust in the elections. So we're trying to get people like the League of Women Voters to look at the concept and say, this makes sense. So if that can be done and you folks could write a letter of support at the appropriate time once we get in front of the right legislators or bureaucrats, whoever we end up talking with, we would appreciate to if you were so inclined to get a letter of support. And it's all about just being able to make the decisions that determine how the elections are being conducted. Right now, the main decisions are being made by the Secretary of State. All the folks who are doing all the hard work, the heavy lifting of the audits out in the counties, they're basically just following the rules that are set up by the Colorado Secretary of State. So our position is the Secretary of State, I think, has got 27 or 28 rules that they've established for different things within elections. One of those rules, Rule 25, has to do with audits. So our proposal would be to have a separate group set up, a commission, a committee, whatever you want to call it. It ought to include people who are maybe former election people, people who are from both of the parties, people who have a consulting background, experts like Neil, people who are maybe auditors or statisticians. Anyway, if those kinds of people made these big decisions, they'd only have to meet maybe a couple times a year and then produce these rules. And I would say what they would do is not throw out the baby in the bathwater, but take the rules that exist right now, pull them away from the Secretary of State, put them under this new committee, and then have them use those as their starting point to evolve, in whatever direction they want to. So anyway, that's the concept in a nutshell, is to bring some independence to the process. Currently, the big decisions are being made is like how many and what elections contests, are being audited. Now, right now, they only pick maybe one on the state level, one on the county level. And we'd like to see more contests being audited. We would like to see maybe some creativity on the setting of the risk limit. Currently, the Secretary of State sets one risk limit for the whole state. We think there's arguments to be made, depending on how the audits are structured, that we might be able to raise that risk limit. So we would do more contests, but fewer ballots in each contest. But I'm going to leave that part of it up to Neil and the statisticians. But in general, we're looking to really take those decisions out of the hands of the Secretary of State, put them in the hands of a independent commission. That way, more people would be inclined to trust the results, put it that way. So I know that's a big picture, but if anybody has any comments, any questions, I'd be happy to listen to them. But so far, everyone that we've talked to about this looks at you and goes, well, why isn't it that way now? Well, I don't know, but it is.
Actually, this would be a combination of people at the Secretary of State's office with this independent committee.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're not doing away with, you're not eliminating the involvement of the Secretary of State's office and their oversight. And many people may trust that.
They ought to be, Yeah,
And
they
they-
ought to be part of the conversation, but they shouldn't be making the whole decision. The other person we'd like to see involved, or the other office, would be the Office of the State Auditor. So currently, there is only one committee in the legislature, in the whole legislature, that is mandated to be nonpartisan. It's got 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, people from the House and people from the Senate. It's called the Legislative Audit Committee, and it's mandated not to ever have a majority of one party or the other. And underneath that committee oversees the work of the Office of the State Auditor, and that's a non-political position, appointed. It's not a elected position. And I would say this, I have sat in probably a dozen meetings of the Legislative Audit Committee and listened to the state auditor as they review all these different agencies within the state of Colorado. They oversee either the conduct directly or oversee every every audit in the state of Colorado except for one, and that is the election audit. So we'd like to see that entity have some voice in the process because they are skilled auditors. There's probably maybe a dozen or more, probably 15 or 20 people there who are CPAs. So you look at every other committee within the legislature, and there are attorneys everywhere and not an accountant to be found. So anyway, being an accountant, I find that interesting. So any other questions? I'd welcome comments. I can put my phone number, my email in the chat so that anybody, if you read this document, you have questions, just reach out to me directly. Does that make sense?
So, Michael, just to let you know, when I clicked on the policy position thing, it wanted to save it. So I saved it and then opened it up and it was all good.
Okay.
And
I just posted in here, you had a Word version. I just posted a PDF version.
okay. And then it says, I put a question about Lori's part of this. Are the observers trying to audit all of the pulled ballots? I think that we might need more observers if there are several teams, if we're trying to. And I think there's somebody out here who wants my room right now, so I'm gonna just check.
I'll go ahead and answer. Well, the more the better is all we can say. You know, the more it doesn't have to be every single ballot. The more ballots the more ballots we compare, the greater confidence we have. So if you can do all of them, great. If you can do only part of them, that's way better than doing none.
Okay, great, thanks.
So Karen, I would have a question for you. I don't know how your group operates, governance wise or whatever, but for you to take a position on something like what we're proposing here, how does that work? Do you have a board that meets and discusses these things or what?
Well, I would think that probably we could have a conversation. I think probably a little more education, and you notice a lot of our people are gone now. But I think the place to start would be to get some support from this group that we then would take to the executive director and take it to the state board.
Okay.
I am wondering, up until the end of my term in June, I'm still the local league support. Would you have any problems with me sharing this policy position with local league leaders across the
Nope,
state?
that'd be fine. Yeah.
Okay, I will do that.
So, and if anyone has any questions, I put my email address in the chat. Just reach out to me, or Neil or Lori. I mean, any of us would be happy to talk and answer any questions.
My recollection is that the existing League of Women Voters Colorado election security position calls for independence. I'm not sure how specific it is, so the first thing to do is to look at that. The way that decision making for advocacy works is that we first study things and adopt positions, which in election security we did about 4 or 5 years ago. And there's also a national position that has a lot of real good things. And given a position, a league representative can advocate for something. So to the extent that it's already in our position, we can already advocate for it. To the extent that we want to add to it or vet it or talk to more people, we should do that comparison the way that Karen's talking about.
And this evolved out of a conversation that started with Judd Choate. And, he basically said, okay, well, why don't you write up a policy paper on it, which is what I did, which is what I shared. And so that's our question, our request. So if you can run that up the flagpole, whatever way possible, we'd appreciate it.
Now, have you
I'm gonna have
gotten,
to run also, but this has been great. I'll hold
okay,
on a little bit
is
longer.
Judd
Keep
on board
going.
with this? Is Judd on board with this?
Judd has looked at it. So here's what Judd basically told me. He said, as long as the current office of the Secretary of State is the person who's sitting in that chair right now, you'll probably not get any support for it. So, but we all know that that position is going to change in another 9 months. So,
Okay, well, what I will do then is I will send this out to the local leagues and I'm really sorry we didn't have more people. I don't know what we need to
oh, that's
do.
okay. Look, I think when you look at the document that we've presented, I don't think you'll find anything controversial in it. It's a lot of common sense. It's a nonpartisan approach, so I think that's right down your alley.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. Thanks. And you are certainly welcome to come to our meetings anytime. So,
Okay, I appreciate that.
all righty. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and
Thank you,
thank you,
Lori.
Karen, for organizing, and Lori, you did a fabulous job. And really, anytime anyone has any questions about any of this stuff, we love it and would love the feedback.
And just so you know, our next meeting will be on, hang on just a second, will be on June the 18th. So,
Okay,
all right. Well,
thank you, Karen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.